Welcome, everybody. Like to begin by first thanking Hamle and the Palestine Digital Activism Forum and all of those who are supporting on working on this excellent forum. In the previous session, we heard about how Palestinians are perhaps the most monitored and surveilled people on earth, with Israel using Palestinians as a laboratory for much of their surveillance equipment. Now, this panel is going to take a look at digital rights from a slightly different perspective. Instead of surveillance, in this session, we're focused on deplatforming, and in particular on economic deplatforming, in other words, erasure, and how this deplatforming or erasure affects Palestinians' rights to access freedom, justice, and dignity. Now, for decades, Israel has worked to systematically silence Palestinians and in many cases, delegitimize Palestinians in an effort to dominate the discourse about Palestine and to hide Israel's actions. Now, of course, this has included coordinated attacks and targeting activists and organizations who are working for Palestinian human rights, carried out as a part of an institutionalized system by the Israeli government, by Israeli NGOs that support the Israeli government, and of course, as we all know it, by online trolls. Now, these government-led efforts to smear Palestinians have caused real harm on both individual and collective levels to the economic, social, and political lives of Palestinians. And these efforts have led to restraint exercised by governments and businesses all over the world to fund Palestine and Palestinian organizations. Now, of particular interest for this panel is Israel's work on economic deplatforming by campaigning online financial payment platforms to prevent Palestinians from accessing these payment methods. In this panel today, we're going to hear about these efforts and, more importantly, how Palestinians are finding methods to address these economic deplatforming efforts. Now, to discuss this matter further, I'm delighted to be joined by Ma'an Hamad, who's a campaigner with ECHO, with Sari Taha, who is a managing director of Momentum Labs, and with Samer Afani, who is the chief of the Financial Tech and Innovation Division of the Palestine Monetary Authority. Of course, for those of you who have questions, please feel free to pose them in the chat box. And I want to turn the platform over to you. Let's begin with you, Ma'an. Ma'an, welcome. Can you tell us a little bit about the legal lens on the denial of rights to freedom and justice and dignity within our digital age, and about your work with ECHO?
Yes, I'd love to. And I thank you, everyone who's listening in, and Hamla, of course, for inviting me to speak. I was inspired to speak when I got the invite, as the theme covers, such an important conversation around digital rights. It touches on three quite immensely powerful words: freedom, justice, and dignity. And within the Palestinian context, these words point to everything. And here I actually mean everything, because everywhere for Palestinians, these words exist in absence, out of touch and out of sight, however, never out of mind. These words are sort of the fuel that mobilize us all, Palestinians, civil society, and allies, to this cause. I won't pause to give an entire legal lecture on these pillars. Instead, I'll just want to mention something quite quickly, is that in the preamble to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it found its legacy on the recognition of the inherent dignity and equal and inalienable rights as the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world. As 75 years of apartheid occupation and settler colonization in Palestine have devastated the most basic and fundamental rights of Palestinians, I must recognize the importance and the immediate need of the international community, and importantly, companies, to act. In fact, if history has proven anything, I almost necessitate that companies stand on the right side. I grew up as a millennial, meaning that I participated in the transition from the bulky days of dial-up internet to this sort of miraculous digital world, where online tools and platforms allow me to feel connected to the entirety of the internet. The multitude of social media and digital platforms felt like a cutting-edge counter to a world filled with oppression and racism. Unfortunately, as I grew, my understanding of justice in this digital world was perhaps a little bit premature. What I instead learned was that our online world carries the very same pillars of domination that exist outside of it, and the baffling mental gymnastics of double standards that apply to Palestinians for being Palestinian act as a reminder to why a panel like this is so important. I want to focus on one example of one company for one reason, and that's really to highlight and remind again about these three important words: freedom, justice, and dignity. For several years, starting all the way back into 2015 and 2016, Palestinians and their allies have been campaigning against PayPal, one of the world's most recognized payment platforms, in order to get the company to reverse their current operating policy, which denies services to Palestinians with a Palestinian bank account, while providing an entire suite of services to Israelis. The campaign is fighting for Palestinians' equal access to the digital economy. PayPal, for those who don't know, is a crucial economic tool for freelancers, entrepreneurs, and businesses regionally as well as internationally. A recent survey produced by our friends Hamle states that 80% of Palestinian households across all socioeconomic groups would use PayPal if possible. PayPal has justified its decision not to operate in the occupied territories by classifying the region as high risk. But importantly, PayPal does provide services to Israelis living in illegal settlements across the West Bank. The irony of risk being tied to ID color versus contravention to international law is something to note. PayPal has a responsibility to ensure its services and operations are provided in a non-discriminatory manner and in accordance to the United Nations guiding principles on business and human rights. Not just for its own sake, and perhaps this is where Echo has a little bit of magic, but for the shareholders of the company. We, alongside Hamle and Empower, have been campaigning against PayPal recently to reverse this harmful policy and ensure Palestinians have equal access to the digital economy. As a corporate accountability watchdog, at Echo, we have an arsenal of tools to do this, one of which is utilizing shareholder advocacy to bring this conversation straight to executives, the board, and most importantly, shareholders. Every year, shareholders vote during annual general meetings on proposals filed against companies. There has been a long-standing history of shareholder advocacy pushing forward a responsibility towards human rights, going all the way back to the dismantling of South African apartheid. This year, Harrington Investments, with our support, has filed a shareholder resolution requesting that PayPal's board establish a policy that ensures that Palestinians do not suffer discriminatory exclusion. Tomorrow is PayPal's annual general meeting, which means that shareholders will vote on our resolution. Our campaign simply calls on PayPal to follow its own mission, which quotes, "We believe that the full participation in the global economy is a right, not a privilege." Our campaign will not end tomorrow. It is a continued fight, and one that hinges on the dignity, freedom, and eventual justice for Palestine in the real world and online.
Thank you very much, Man. Sari, I actually want to turn to you now. You're the managing director of Momentum Labs. Can you talk a little bit about what harm it has caused, this economic deplatforming has caused when it comes to everything from innovation to being able to access financial markets? Sari, I think we can't hear you. I think you are muted.
Oh, yeah. Really sorry about that. So you just guys missed the thank you. So I was just thanking Hamle again. It's really an honor to be joining the forum again, I think for the second year. And I really echo what Man mentioned, that being Palestinian, it's a fight across digitally, offline, online. And, we're fighting to exist on all fronts, I believe. So I will start by saying that back in 2022, we worked with Hamle on producing kind of the first report on e-commerce in Palestine. Having worked on that report, we took two approaches. The first one is to look at the platform that enable e-commerce businesses and enable like entrepreneurs to work online, whether it be big companies like Amazon, like Facebook, like Instagram, and their tools that they have for business. And also we looked at the freelance platforms that, we now live in a world where, freelance gig economy is on the rise. A lot of companies tend to work with contractors rather than with full-time employees. And we looked at the policies and availability of these services in Palestine. Not to our surprise, what we found was that it's very hard to the businesses and entrepreneurs in Palestine to establish a presence like anyone else in the world, whether it be they struggle with connecting their bank accounts or having bank accounts in the first place. Maybe Samir can talk about this later on. Connecting their bank accounts, opening PayPal accounts. In some platforms, Palestine was not even listed as a country. When these platforms, they roll out their services, they tend to kind of overlook Palestine for some reason. And if ever they open the services, and it's quite usually very late. This is, we found, like really, really problematic because, now we live in a very connected world, and it's like you're limiting access to markets, you're limiting access to opportunities. It's like you're putting people already under occupations and youth with like not much so opportunities under sanctions. This is also adding like more trouble, maybe like to people like the young people in Gaza, where high unemployment rate is very high, and people are very talented and skilled, and there's also the nature of our economy. We don't have too much manufacturing, we don't have so much things. So being online and providing services online and skills online is the only way forward. So imagine that the only way forward is like being blocked with like a lot of continuous blockages, whether sometimes intentionally, sometimes not intentionally. Sometimes the market in Palestine is not interesting, and there's not only the political aspect, it's like there are restrictions that comes online all the time. But to our finding as well, that we Palestinians, we are persistent, we exist, and we are very talented. We found out that the youth are very clever. We always find way around it. And we always we might need to put Israel instead of Palestine. We might need to kind of travel, open a bank account abroad and come back. There are always ways to kind of stay and resist and preserve, which is very interesting. And this is what I always kind of like to speak of, instead of just always like pointing out to the bad. Like, we can always find a way, but this is not, of course, to give any excuse for all the discrimination that we Palestinians feel. Anyway, so that's when it comes to like e-commerce. Now, what I want to say that the restrictions online also affect the development of the economy offline. Meaning, like if people can't secure these experiences online and work cross-border and with international clients, in addition to the political high-risk perception of Palestine under the occupation, and no kind of foreign investments or like companies open here with the high unemployment and people not being able to be skilled and in the new skills, and the technology is quite quickly evolving. This also affecting the offline world, like no companies being established, no investment is being made, and so on and so forth. So offline and online is also connected, and they evolve in parallel. And like this is something also like I think is worth mentioning. Like most. This is one side of the equation that I want to mention, but there's another sector that's been growing, and although now there's a lot of layoffs in the tech sector, in the technology sectors, we hear of big layoffs in companies, and maybe the global economy is like at a point of not so good recession and so on and so forth. But the technology sector has been gaining so much attention here in Palestine, and outsourcing, and trying to attract multinational to open offices and so on and so forth. Given also a lot of regional geopolitical changes that made, and Palestinians being left behind in a lot of economic opportunities, it's still how I'm gonna put this, like all these restrictions and lack of access to the online kind of prevents equipping the talent, giving them the exposure they need, in addition to all of the restrictions that are imposed on us because of the occupation. It's very hard to kind of convince people to invest in online business in Palestine. E-commerce here, one of the cases that we've heard, for example, is that maybe some ladies working in creating some handcrafts and shipping worldwide, but there are some also problems with the post office, with selling online, with ordering online. The address system is still being developed, and we've heard some businesses use kind of their relative address in Jerusalem or inside the occupied Palestinian land. And so there's also the infrastructure that also supports these businesses under occupation is also underdeveloped. So what I'm trying to convey here is that this is a value chain. Like, digital is one part of it, but also it affects offline and affects online, and the education is also another part of it, and the exposure. Collectively, we are left with a no competitive advantage, as a youth, as a young people, as so on, in a very competitive economy, in a very competitive landscape and world. For the Palestinian to excel and like to be present and to do transactions online, you have to do maybe, I don't know, tenfold the amount of work, or like stay up like tenfold the nights and find ways around things and so on and so forth. So this is kind of the reality we are dealing with. It's very hard to attract money. It's very hard to attract resources. It's very hard to kind of invest in such a thing. And this is unfortunate, but this is kind of the reality that we are dealing with. And that therefore, having this ongoing advocacy, writing about it, and also what we do a lot is we do these mapping study consultancy, trying to also provide policy recommendations based on bottom-up approaches, like talking to the people, talking to the youth, what they're doing, how they're doing, how can we scale success stories, is all what we have in our toolbox at the moment. Given also the how do you say it, the stuck political process, and the lack of aspiration in the youth. So it's all combined. It's really difficult. I don't want to be like super gloomy and so on and so forth. That's why I'll go back that still within all of this situation, it's amazing how you can find smart people finding way about things and building things and like delivering services and putting Palestine's names out there. It's inspiring, but also you feel sorry for the amount of work and effort that they put on forward. That should not be the case, and it's not right at all. Yeah.
Sari, it sounds like the roadblocks that we experience in Palestine, that instead of having the most direct route, we always have to find a way to go around to be able to survive and to be able to have some semblance of meeting up with life, to just to be able to have our daily existence. I want to turn, so we're going to, in the second part, talk about some of the ways that people have been challenging this and the alternative methods. But before I do that, I want to turn to Samer Afani, who is from the Palestine Monetary Authority. And Samer, I would love to hear from you about the work that the Palestine Monetary Authority is doing to try to address all of these restrictions and the economic deplatforming that Palestinians have experienced.
أهلا وسهلا. بحب أولا أشكر المنتدى الفلسطيني للنشاط الرقمي وحملة على هاي الفرصة واستضافة سلطة النقد بهذا المنتدى. اسمحوا لي أحكي بالعربي. بالبداية إحنا كسلطة نقد عندنا دراية كافية إنه عدم الوصول إلى المنصات المالية العالمية، منصات الدفع العالمية، بيحرمنا كفلسطينيين من أبسط حقوقنا، بالأخص لدى الرياديين وأصحاب العمل الحر والشباب. فكان لنا دور كسلطة النقد في التخفيف من التمييز الاقتصادي من خلال إطلاق الاستراتيجية الوطنية للشمول المالي واستراتيجية التكنولوجيا المالية بشكل خاص، وذلك لدعم عدالة وصول الخدمات المالية لكافة فئات المجتمع، من فقير وغني، من غير مشمول ماليا، من ذكر وأنثى، بشكل عادل وكريم، وبالتالي نحقق زيادة في نسب الشمول المالي والأكسس واليوزج تو فاينانس والوصول لمصادر التمويل بشكل عادل، وخلق المزيد من الخدمات والمنتجات المالية. عملنا على إطلاق تعليمات الحساب الشمول المالي أو بما يعرف الحساب الأساسي بمتطلبات مخففة، بحيث يمكن لأي مواطن فلسطيني فتح حساب بنكي بدون حد أدنى وبدون أي عمولة، ومنح بطاقات صراف آلي لكل المواطنين بشكل مجاني. وهدفنا من هذا الحساب تجاوز المعيقات التنظيمية المتزايدة على أصحاب العمل الحر والشباب والرياديين اللي بيشتغلوا أو بيسعوا كمان للعمل من خلال مؤسسات شركات عالمية، وخصوصا للشباب الرياديين في قطاع غزة اللي بيشتغلوا مع منصات عالمية وأونلاين، إنهم يستلموا مستحقاتهم المالية من هذه المنصات العالمية، وبالتالي بيستفيدوا من الخدمات المصرفية الأساسية من سحب وإيداع للشيكات واستقبال وإرسال الحوالات من داخل وخارج فلسطين. كمان إحنا عملنا على ترخيص 5 شركات دفع زي ما بتعرفوا حاليا بيشتغلوا بالسوق الفلسطيني، بيقدموا خدمات الاي وولتس، بيقدموا بطاقات إلكترونية لتساعد الوصول لهي الخدمات للمناطق المهمشة. وإحنا بسلطة النقد من منطلق إنه عارفين إنه هذا التمييز الاقتصادي والمالي بيأثر على تحديد الخيارات الشباب والرياديين وكل فئات المجتمع بشكل عام، وبيأثر على فرصنا بالحصول على المزيد من المساعدات المالية. عملنا على تسريع عملية التحول الرقمي وتعزيز استخدام الابتكارات والمساعدات المالية، وعملنا على خلق مجالات دفع جديدة وبيع والتسويق الإلكتروني والتجارة الإلكترونية والتحويلات المالية، وخفضنا الرسوم المعاملات الإلكترونية قد ما بنقدر بالتعاون مع البنوك. ومنحنا ترخيص لمجموعة من الشركات الريادية العاملة في مجال تقديم خدمات الدفع الإلكتروني واستخدام بوابات الدفع الإلكتروني لشركات ماستر كارد وفيزا العالمية. وسهلنا كمان دخول شركات مثل أبل باي العالمية للسوق الفلسطيني، بالإضافة إنه إحنا سمحنا لمنصة ميبس إنها تعمل في فلسطين بهدف تقديم حلول كبوابة دفع إلكتروني للرياديين وتجار التجزئة والشركات الناشئة. بالإضافة إنه أطلقنا المختبر التنظيمي Regulatory Sandbox لتشجيع الابتكارات والمساعدة في تجاوز المعيقات والصعوبات في منصات الدفع العالمية، وإيجاد أفكار جديدة مبتكرة وحلول من قبل الشباب والرياديين للابتكار بهذا المجال. هذا بشكل مختصر دورنا كمشرع أو كجهة رقابية. بنعمل كل ما بوسعنا وبكل جهدنا على المساعدة في التجاوز التمييز الرقمي الواقع على الرياديين والشباب. كل هذا الجهد لنحط مبادرات بديلة للشباب في هذا المجال، مش بس للشباب، لكل فئات المجتمع.
شكرا كثير سامر. Matt, I want to turn back to you, and you focused on PayPal and its impact when it came to PayPal, but can you also talk about how this economic deplatforming, of course, goes beyond PayPal and how it has also impacted NGOs and the operation of NGOs and the way that they perhaps are able to operate or not operate inside Palestine?
Yes, happy to speak to this. And maybe I can start by just mentioning that this conversation on NGOs is is extremely relevant. As you know, last year and the year before, there was a sort of systematic attempt to attack 6 human rights NGOs in Palestine for their credible human rights work with sort of bogus labeling as terrorist organizations. So beyond sort of these 6 organizations, I also think it's important to focus on smaller and other local organizations that in theory are just erased from what should be a very organic and healthy digital and online world. So deplatforming impairs, if I'm not mistaken, from reporting by Hamla and others, 150,000 small and medium enterprises in Palestine. I don't know how many thousands of those are NGOs, but I can give a sort of very realistic example. At the moment, I'm in the US, and during Eid, when I try to fast, I try to do my best, but I do one thing, which is usually trying to pay zakat to organizations that I believe in their mission. This was a very simple example of me being unable to do a very low lift sort of support of NGOs or charity organizations because they are void from the same market that thousands of other organizations sort of are connected to. So this infringes their ability as NGOs or enterprises or businesses or whoever it is to sort of build and sustain what is a sustainable economic reality, to build their work and to make sure that they can empower their mission, which like I said, anywhere else in the world, it's sort of a given. If you have money to support a charity, are usually given 0 hurdles to jump over. Where in Palestine, to your point, and to Seti's, it sort of is like imposed barriers on every sort of step of the way, no matter where you fall, as a company, as an organization, an NGO that does charity work for mental health or health services. They're sort of forced to be sort of off the map when there's very easy ways to sort of make sure that they are instead connected.
And I wanted to, so for those, just as a reminder, for those of you who have any questions, please be sure to put them in the chat. There's so many questions that can be asked on this topic. But I'm going to turn to you, Seti, just to go in order. You mentioned in your introductory remarks that there are a number of ways that people are trying to go around this. And Samir mentioned a few ways that the Palestine Monetary Authority has been working to try to find alternatives. Can you speak a little bit to these alternatives, what they are, and whether they are optimal or not?
Yeah.
How it is that people are using them?
So I'll speak of some of the options, but this does not mean I recommend any of them, because all these are workaround and just people trying to make a living and conduct business and survive under very harsh conditions. So for businesses, a lot of them, they tend to register entities outside of Palestine. It makes their life very much easier, opening bank accounts, Europe, the US, and other countries. For a lot of also like freelancers and individuals, they exhaust kind of their search for service providers, which kind of comes with very high disadvantage being competitive. So they end up kind of using third-party providers, people who kind of middlemen kind of businesses who kind of add some costs. This is kind of not recommended. Sometimes, for example, like someone who have like bank account could kind of open like a freelance agency and work individually with like freelancers and on the ground and kind of try to secure work, then disperse the payment versus kind of the entrepreneurs or individuals working directly with their clients. Palestinian diasporas have been playing really very important and respected role. Hopefully they can be more of that. Whereas they kind of believe in the talent here, they live outside, they do business development, they come here, open business, and kind of overcome a lot of narrative obstacles by just nurturing good business relationship abroad and then securing kind of good digital jobs for young youth people here. Some entrepreneurs here also tend to kind of open business, try to kind of overcome the perception and the bad propaganda like by Palestine, by not mentioning Palestine, just laying out the services out there and so on and so forth. In general, there's a lot of research that people here conduct before choosing a business. I will also mention some cases that we faced personally. Like we work with sometimes consultants from Gaza. It's very hard to kind of transfer money, although they have bank accounts. And then we need to kind of use other bank accounts. And if they have bank accounts, it means that everyone in Palestine who have bank accounts is it's we are the country I think most compliant with anti-terror, anti-money laundering, and so on and so forth. But still, there's difficulty even transferring money to people with bank accounts in Gaza and between Gaza and the West Bank. And this is very problematic because it's like we're one people and we work together all the time. Sometimes when we work with international consultant, like we had a case that we transferred money to a supplier in London, UK, and one of the bank sent him an email we returned the money and we in the future we don't expect to receive any money from the state of Palestine. And this is happening even though we have banking sector that is thriving and we have banking infrastructure in place. So in this case we also find a way, okay, they have another bank account in another country and so on and so forth. So this is what I mean, that it's not the usual case and it's not the so on and so forth, but there's always kind of ways to kind of keep pushing if you're doing the right thing and so on and so forth. And this is kind of the entrepreneurial spirit that in place for all the young people and all the youth that trying to kind of break through all of these kind of restrictions that are imposed on them. We heard also in Gaza, people use some prepaid cards from other countries and so on and so forth. So again, it's not the usual case, but what I'm trying to say here is that no matter what is imposed on us, as long as we are there and we are kind of hopeful for a better future, and we will find a way to kind of do it. But this is not justice, and this is not kind of the just way to move forward. So you better off just let's open this market like any other market. Let's give equal opportunities to people all over the world, because we're in this together. The economic crisis is hitting everyone, and we need all the brains, we need all the minds, and let it be just fair competition without the extra restrictions that is imposed on us. This is what I mean by that it's not recommendation. Again, I'm not recommending any of what I'm saying, but what I'm saying is that we will continue to conduct business and to be present online and to also thrive as well and to be innovative as a nation and as a youth.
Thank you, Sadi. So Samir, I want to turn to you. There's many questions for you. The first one I want to ask you is what is it that can be done? What needs to be done by these financial companies, by the international community? What is it that can and should be done?
تمام. احنا بسلطة النقد بالتعاون مع كافة الجهات المحلية والعالمية دائما بنعمل على الضغط باتجاه توفير الخيارات الخاصة بالخدمات المالية الرقمية والدفع الرقمي للشعب الفلسطيني بكافة فئاته، وذلك لمساعدة الأفراد والمؤسسات للحصول على المساعدات المالية من الجهات الخارجية والمؤسسات اللي بتتضامن معنا كشعب فلسطيني حول العالم. وإحنا بكل لقاءاتنا مع الجهات والمنظمات الدولية زي الورد بانك زي الIMF دائما بنحكي إنه عندنا البنية التحتية بفلسطين جاهزة، وإن القطاع المالي عندنا بفلسطين آمن لعمل أي بزنس وأي منصات عندنا بفلسطين. بالإضافة إنه إحنا عندنا أهمية كتير كبيرة لموضوع حماية حقوق المستهلك وحماية بياناتهم وتعزيز حصول المواطنين على المعرفة والتعليم من خلال الحملات التوعوية اللي بنعملها، اللي بتكون في وسائل الإذاعة أو وسائل التواصل الاجتماعي، بحقق إلهم للشعب الفلسطيني الحرية المالية والعدالة والكرامة. هلا فعندنا إحنا بشكل عام التزام بالمتطلبات العالمية البيست براكتسز، وبنحاول دائما نوصل هذا الالتزام دائما للمؤسسات المالية اللي تحت رقابتنا من ناحية السرية المصرفية والتأكيد على حماية البيانات الخاصة بالعملاء، وبنحرص إنه نبني البنية التحتية تاعتنا بأعلى المعايير الدولية، وبالتالي بنساعد عملية الدفع وداخليا، وبتساعد البنوك تحويل الأموال على المنصات العالمية خارجيا. فدائما احنا بنحكي انه كسلطة النقد انه نضمن انه البنوك ومؤسسات الاقراض وشركات الدفع اللي بيشتغلوا تحت رقابتنا انه سياستها وممارساتها ما بتسبب اي نوع من تمييز رقمي باي شكل من الاشكال، وبندفع انه يطوروا مسارات فعالة للشمول المالي ودمج الاقتصاد الرقمي بعملياتها، وتخفيف التكاليف قد ما بنقدر من رسوم وعمولات على المواطنين. احنا دائما بنحكي مؤسساتنا المالية جاهزة دائما وممتثلة للمعايير العالمية، بتقوم بدورها على أكمل وجه، وبحطوا كثير استثمارات في مشاريع التحول الرقمي والدفع الإلكتروني. وعندنا واليوم بيكون في فرصة لهدول المؤسسات المالية للتخفيف من إجراءات الامتثال لمساعدة المنصات أو المبتكرين والرياديين، فهي ما بتقصر يعني عادة بهذا المجال، ماخذين بعين الاعتبار معايير غسل الأموال AML CFT والريجوليتوري ريسك ومواضيع الديو ديليجنس، عشان نشجع على استخدام مختلف هاي الشروط. علينا انه كفلسطينيين بنحاول نخلي هاي المنصات تعمل عنا بشكل آمن، وبنحقق احنا دائما كل المجهودات كمشرعين ومنظمين بنحاول نخفف هاي المعيقات التنظيمية لخلق فرصة لاستعادة أو لاستفادة الشعب بكل فئاته. فهذا بشكل عام إحنا كسلطة النقد شو دورنا بهذا الموضوع. وزي ما بحكي دائما إنه إحنا مضطرين إنه الموضوع هذا كتير دارج وكتير منيح، إحنا ككل ستيك هولدرز يكون عندنا استراتيجية نبني عليها، ويكون في عندنا صوت واحد، سواء كانت حكومة سواء كان ريجوليتر أو كأي حدا في أصحاب المصلحة، إنه تبوش في هذا الاتجاه، إنه نحقق مزيد من العدالة للشباب والرياديين في هذا المجال.
شكرا سامر، شكرا. Mahan, I want to turn back to you. In your opening remarks, you mentioned the tomorrow's attempt to get a resolution with PayPal. Can you tell us a little bit more about this resolution and the chances of success? Now, I know that this has been a campaign that's been going on for quite some time, but can you tell us a little bit more about how it's reached to this particular point and what it is that can be done, and again, what the chances of success, what you think are the chances of success?
Yes. So one of my mentors always gives me some helpful advice to understand the sort of world of shareholder advocacy, as understanding it as one that is implicitly tied to a bigger campaign. So rarely will a shareholder resolution or a vote on a resolution actually cause success. You sort of enter in knowing that it's unlikely to win. However, because this campaign on PayPal has been going on for many years now and will continue to do so until that sort of success is seen. So this is important because the shareholder resolution world or the advocacy world does offer some really important sort of tools which are usually out of reach for any other sort of corporate accountability campaigning. A shareholder resolution goes directly to the board. It goes to the executives and the owners of the company, and it sort of forces the company to have a conversation. It forces the company to respond. It forces the company to post its sort of response publicly in the US context to the SEC, where shareholders can sort of see this conversation. And as an example, for shareholder resolutions that have won historically in the past, it's this sort of building momentum that sort of forces a company to look itself in the mirror by seeing votes, even something as small as maybe 20% of a vote for a resolution would be quite drastic for a company to understand that their shareholders really do want change. So I'm hoping we have, a good chunk of votes tomorrow, but I'm not going to be holding my breath. Instead, entering this battle is a sort of longer battle where the resolution itself is just one sort of step in the way. And like this conversation, having shown so much and shown so many, such a great example of this light on resilience, the sort of resilient campaigning that needs to happen to force companies to reckon with their own human rights failures. And I'll end with this sort of conversation being that I feel like Palestine is the one place where capitalism sort of goes off the rail, where even a company like PayPal, who has full incentive to open it up to 2 million people, won't. And that broader conversation is one that I think is quite important, and that the structures of power, even being those that want capital and want gain and clients and users, sort of ends up having a weird struggle when it comes to Palestine, and our resolution is part and parcel to that fight to override that.
Well, yeah, man, it's in part because of all of these legal challenges that have been put forward against Arab Bank and others to really try to erase Palestinians, and also, in addition to erasure, to effectively try to shut down the Palestinian economy, in the hopes that by shutting down the Palestinian economy, Palestinians will either leave or they'll just somehow magically disappear. This has been the way in which Israel has addressed Gaza, is to shut it down completely in the hopes that somehow it's going to disappear, and of course do whatever it is that they want to do. And so it's interesting that, as you put it, that the system of capitalism doesn't work when you have 4 million people, 2 million in the West Bank, 2 million in the Gaza Strip, who could potentially access PayPal, and yet they don't want to do this because perhaps fear of backlash. Seti, I wanted to turn a little bit to you, and before I do that, I want to again remind people that if they have any questions, to please feel free to put them in the chat box. I will get to them in the next couple of minutes. I'm going to ask my last round of questions to each of them, and then we'll get to the questions. So Seti, I wanted to turn back to you. You mentioned at your opening remarks about the impact on the Palestinian economy, and I like the way that you put it, that that's holistic. It's one feeds into the other, and so on. And as I believe it was you mentioned, over 96% of Palestinian businesses are small and medium-sized businesses, and with such a high rate of unemployment, these deplatforming, these financial deplatforming mechanisms are having an impact, of course, on the economy. Can you go a little bit more in depth so that people understand actually the depth of what it is that this is doing to the Palestinian economy and to Palestinians in general?
Yes, of course. So, how I'm gonna put it is that you mentioned that the majority of businesses in Palestine are SMEs that somehow they plateaued their growth. So they are already established in the market. They have their market share, and there's no kind of growth potential out there. And we have every year around 40,000 people graduating from the local universities only. And current economy structures, like the biggest employer, is public sector, and we have a lot of youth and employees that go work inside Israel, whether in the construction sectors. Recently, even Israel started issuing kind of permits for engineers for the high-tech sector in Israel, which also is very problematic, because then how you're going to build like a tech sector in Palestine if all the talent is kind of thrown for higher salaries and is working kind of inside of Israel. And the Palestinian economy is like, it's under occupation, but also have the same level of exposure like any other economy in the world, meaning that there is digital transformation happening across all the sectors, all the traditional sectors, tourism, agriculture, manufacturing, and so on and so forth. And for this digital transformation to be happening, there is a lot of knowledge still that needs to be into the market, and with all of the restrictions that is happening on the platform and in the knowledge, and also on the land, by having expats coming in and going, easy visa, easy people to come, people travel easily. The blockade on Gaza is very hard to kind of adapt the traditional economic sectors with where they need to be, and for them to be also competitive in the short and long term. Also, like any other countries, like here, innovation is happening also at a very fast rate. We need like companies and SMEs need to adopt kind of digital solutions, cloud services, big data protections. The fact that Palestine is not connected with like there's like deplatforming happening for like Palestinian access and like interaction with other markets and other kind of clients and big companies, makes actually the Palestinian data not only exposed to like surveillance and so on and so forth, but also exposed to unethical businessmen exploiting kind of the data, like doing with it here kind of whatever they want to do, and so on and so forth. So it's also kind of hampering kind of the natural development of the market. So with adoption of cloud solutions, there need to the government, the ministry, if you go like talk to the Ministry of Telecommunication and so on and so forth, there's already a lot of plans that is happening in terms of like data protection, cybersecurity, like laws, promote, like people are trying their best to put forward kind of the best agenda out there, but still very, very problematic. So when we talk about the economy, we talk about growth, we talk about contribution, we talk about also Palestine as a country kind of the positioning itself that competitive advantage, certain products, certain skills, and we try to kind of put ourselves there on the international markets with trade, when it's very, 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 very difficult at the moment, and we don't have any specific niche and so on and so forth. In addition, we have the duty to kind of think about the future generation, what the kind of jobs they will be working. Will they be only kind of working building settlements with the construction, and we can't even plan for blue collar works. We don't have manufacturing. It's very hard to manufacture, very hard to export, very hard to import. So our only bet is on the knowledge-based economy, and with the knowledge-based economy, then just open it up. Make it easy for people to kind of have bank accounts, make them compete like the Palestinian need to compete with the Italian, with the French, with the Moroccan, with the Rwandan, with the one from South Africa. Like let's make it a fair competition out there. So that's kind of the push and narrative that we need to kind of think of. And the future for the Palestinian youth is unfortunately a bittersweet entrepreneurial. Like it's entrepreneurship not out of opportunity, but out of need, out of it's hard on itself when all the support system is in place. But in our case, it's bittersweet kind of opportunity. So therefore, what I want to say, like, and my remarks, and that people need to support each other here. Like in the end, like if we know like someone is starting a process or like delivering a service, we need to kind of start buying locally, start supporting the youth that are starting here. If you're a Palestinian diaspora outside, if you're working on a project, try to hire a Palestinian designer, a Palestinian developer. If we don't do this, if we don't believe in our skills, if we don't kind of build it inward, outward, no one will. And that's how we kind of increase our power, showcase our competitiveness, and showcase that we will continue to be there. But this is the starting point. The starting point is in believing that we can, and to working with each other, and we can together kind of, I think, step by step kind of knock on each door, each in his domain, one doing advocacy, one doing business, one just being an artist, and that's I think the way forward.
Sam, you mentioned, and so speaking of building on Sari, and build and supporting one another. Simon, you mentioned something in your remarks which I think was very important, and that is the regulatory sandbox. Can you speak a little bit more about what this regulatory sandbox is and how it will help with innovation?
أكيد. Regulatory Sandbox هو عبارة عن صندوق رملي اختباري للمنظمين بيطلقوه للرياديين يختبروا أو يعملوا تيست على بيئة حقيقية للإنوفيشن تاعهم. أي حدا عنده ابتكار خاص بالتكنولوجيا المالية بيقدر يتفضل عنا يقدم طلب عن طريق الويب سايت تاع سلطة النقد، انه هو جاهز تو بي الانوفيشن تاعته بتكون جاهزه تو بي تيستد على البيئه التجريبيه داخل سلطه النقد. بس احنا مش حاضنه ولا مسرعه اعمال، احنا من بيئه تجريبيه للشباب اللي عندهم هاي الافكار. بدها تيجي الفكره تكون ريدي تو بي تيستد، يعني مش حدا لسه ما عنده البزنس موديل جاهز، لازم تكون فكرته جاهزه. بيجي عندنا على سلطه النقد بتقدم طلب، عندنا هيئه لجنه خاصه بدراسه الطلبات الخاصه بالابتكارات الجديده، وبقيموا على اساسها في معايير تقييم، واذا كان الطلب ملبي لاي شروط هاي بندخله على بيئه الاختبار تستد 6 اشهر، وبعدين في النهايه بنعطيه شهاده عدم ممانعه او ترخيص ينزل على السوق يشتغل. هذا بشكل عام المختبر التنظيمي. في بس حابب انا ما سمعت السؤال، بجوز انت سالتي عن موضوع الكريبتو كرنسي او
لا, I'm going to ask you about that in just a minute.
اوكي.
Please go ahead.
اوكي. سوري عشان قطع الصوت. هلا بس عشان نرجع شوي لاصل الحكايه. وقت في 2017 بلشت البومينج تاع العملات المشفره، الناس صارت تشتري العملات المشفره والبيتكوين. احنا كسلطه النقد انتهجنا منهاج الويت اند سي، تركنا السوق يتطور وما تدخلنا فيه. بعد بفترة لاحظنا إنه صارت كتير الناس اللي مستثمرة بالبيتكوين عم تيجي عنا على سلطة النقد، بدهم يقدموا شكاوى، بدهم يعترضوا مصرياتهم استثمروها في البيتكوين، مش عارفين لأي جهة يروحوا. فإحنا كان دورنا إنه حسينا إنه صار في مشكلة على خطر على الاستقرار المالي، فاضطرينا نتدخل نصدر تعليمات بهذا الموضوع. إنه حذرنا البنوك وحذرنا الناس انه يتعاملوا بالعملات المشفره، لانه في النهايه هاي مصاريهم ما في حدا جهه رقابيه يتجهوا لها يقدموا شكاوى، او المستثمرين فيها مش عارفين يرجعوا مصرياتهم على البلد. فاحنا اضطرينا نتدخل. اذا سالتيني ليش احنا كسلطه النقد حذرنا التعامل بالكريبتو كرنسي، في عده اسباب. لانها اول شيء عاليه التذبذب، وتلحق خسائر مالية فادحة وغير مضمونة من أي جهة، وعرضة لجرائم الاحتيال، ويصعب على المواطنين تتبعها، وكمان تستخدم في تمويل وأعمال وأنشطة غير مشروعة. فهي بشكل عام كان هدفنا بتحذيرها، يعني لا حتى نشوف العالم لوين رايح في موضوع السنترال بانك ديجيتال كرنسي، إنه يكون في إشي ريجوليتد من كل البنوك المركزية، يكون تحت رقابة المشرعين، فبالتالي يكون إشي مضمون معروف لأي جهة تابعة.
So just as a last opportunity for anybody who has any questions, feel free to pose it now. We only have 4 minutes left in this session. Senator, there was a question, and I do want to pose it to you, which is, according to what was written in the question by Tariq, that there seems to be the Palestinian Authority, by Tamid, the Palestinian Authority prevents the transfers of money between the West Bank and between the Gaza Strip. Can you speak to this, Samir?
أكيد. هلا إحنا بسلطة النقد عم نشتغل على موضوع أو مشروع جديد اسمه Instant Payment. راح يكون هو تحويل من الأكاونت تو أكاونت or wallet to wallets or wallets to account. راح يكون هذا المشروع centralized by سلطة النقد. فراح أي مشاكل راح تواجه الناس سواء في الضفة وغزة راح تنحل، لأنه راح يكون إشي مركزي عندنا بسلطة النقد. هلا ممكن تكون في مشاكل عم تواجه الناس، ممكن يكون في موضوع نقل البيانات أو الانتروبابيليتي اللي هي الأنظمة كيف بتحكي مع بعض. ممكن يكون في بعض المشاكل التقنية في بعض الأوقات بين الضفة وغزة. بس احنا كسلطة النقد اذا في اي حدا بتواجهه اي مشكلة بهذا الاتجاه ممكن يجي عندنا على قاعة استقبال الجمهور. احنا بنستقبل الشكاوى الخاصة بهذا الموضوع وبنحاول ندرس كيس باي كيس. اذا كان في مشكلة بهذا الاتجاه بنحاول نتواصل مع الشركات البي اس بيز او شركات الدفع، بنحاول نحل الاشكالية.
Okay, in our last couple of minutes before we close off, I want to turn to all of you and ask what it is that we can do, people who are attending the forum, what it is that can be done to try to open or to address this issue of deplatforming. So, Matt, I'm going to first ask you, then Seti, and then I'll end with you, Sam.
Yeah, I think if you're a shareholder or an owner of any sort of company's shares that is part and parcel to this sort of discrimination, you have a voice as somebody who owns shares and is relevant to it. And I also think there's a growing tide of this conversation changing, where the lens on discrimination and justice has become so prominent in the narrative around Palestine that wherever you have an opportunity to raise that voice and to use your microphone or your privilege, be sure to do it. Like Seti and everybody on this panel has said, it's regular people and businesses and humans on the other end of this sort of oppressive cycle that sort of depend on the public to pressure private.
Thank you very much, Matt. And Seti, any final comments that you'd like to add?
Along the same line, and I don't have anything much to add, I think, but yeah, we should just always, speak truth to power and and also just think of value and just compete ethically, intellectually, and just to continue to grow and just push boundaries. I think that's the way forward. But again, very important to kind of support people who are starting off on their own, support businesses, freelancers. It's a very difficult business environment out there, and it's very abnormal, I would say. So just be kind and just support wherever you can and do whatever you can.
Thank you very much. And Sam, the last word is yours.
بس بشكل مختصر أنا عندي نقطتين، إنه إحنا ممكن نشتغل أكثر على بناء قدرات وورش عمل وتدريبات لكافة فئات المجتمع وزيادة التوعية بهذا الموضوع. التوبيك كتير منيح يعني، ولازم إحنا نشتغل أكثر هذا الموضوع. كمان عندي مقترح إذا ممكن يكون في استراتيجية موحدة لجميع الأطراف إنهم يشتغلوا على إزالة المعيقات اللي بتأثر على الاقتصاد الرقمي، ونعمل على تشكيل لجنة من كل الأطراف لتمثل منصة ضغط على المنصات العالمية مثل باي بال، ونبين إنه فلسطين هي بيئة آمنة من الناحية المالية والاقتصادية لقيام هذه المنصات بأعمالها تجارية عندنا بفلسطين.
Thank you very much. So I want to thank all of you, Ma'an Hamad, Sari Taha, Samar Afane, I'm Diana Boutou, and thank you very much for the Palestine Digital Activism Forum for hosting this today. You've left us with a lot of things to think about. Thank you.
Thank you, Diana. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.